who may not be as familiar with the full history and theology of it, that answers one question as to on what authority would an annulment be granted or not granted? Who would do it? Who possibly could it be? And it would seem to me that, as the Father said, it would begin the Pope, certainly. We had a nice sermon today at St. Columbkille's about contrasting Peter and Paul. And he mentioned that Peter tended to be somewhat humble and careful, and Paul tended to worry about things like whether women wearing hats would interfere with the angels moving about the room. And he felt perhaps that was why our Lord gave Peter the judgment of these very, very difficult issues that we have. To go more specifically to, I believe that the Catholic Church has the authority to decide who among them will make those decisions and to develop procedures for them. The issue, of course, that is really being debated, as we mentioned, is that there are so many more annulments today than there were in 1939. I can speak to that to some extent. That's almost my lifetime. I was born in 1938, and my parents were converted by Father Feeney before I was born. So like yourselves, I've been through all the many changes in all sorts of directions of the Church, in which both my parents died peacefully. I should mention that there are some reasons are circular as to why there are so many more annulments that are not divorces. They are, as we all know, there is a procedure for an annulment in cases that are very serious obstacles to marriage, to the marriage not being consummated. A very common one is one of the parties misrepresenting themselves. Another is various illnesses, such as I work with, alcoholism, different forms of mental disturbance. Whatever they are, the person made an honest attempt at marriage, and granted that fewer annulments were given in those days, it's one of many changes of numbers. When I was a little boy, you wouldn't see many people going to communion in many Catholic churches in our parish because many people believed that it was sacrilegious to go too frequently. It's one of the things that does change, not the essential truths of the Church, but certain practices. There'll be more people doing them one year and more another. As I understand it, the Church has asked for more leniency on annulments in order to deal with cases of conscience of partners who felt that they had not known what they were doing when they married, granted, and needed to be reconciled with the Church. And so they were actually, as the Father mentions, encouraged to look at each individual case, not to judge it out of hand, but to look at it carefully. One reason there's so many more annulments just is common sense. In 1939, divorce was rare, and divorce was not even legal in many states of the Union, or very difficult to get. And throughout the world, it was even less possible. And many requirements for annulment, you have to be divorced first. So it's kind of circular, but if you're going to have a lot more divorces, you will have more annulments because they'll be taken out of that population. Another reason, the pressures on married couples today is strictly a non-religious reason, is, as we know, a married couple in 1950 could raise a family on a single income. And today the economy has not favored marriages, to say the least. Where I live in Brighton, we have a lot of 40 and 50-year-olds living with their parents, something I never would have seen before, and single people are becoming a huge majority. I am sure there are other points that I would like to make, but I feel I'm fortunate that the other speakers on the team of Defending the Church, I believe, have done more of an in-depth study. I did have the pleasure of going into church history and found many fascinating things about marriage in the early church. However, that constitutes a little knowledge, which we all know is a dangerous thing, so I won't entertain you with what the rules on what you do if your wife commits adultery in the early church. However, I hope that I haven't been overly facetious in my defense of the Church on annulments. I think my reason is, the main one, is that this is an issue of care of souls, as I'm sure all of us here are on the same page on. And I would like to start with it being legitimate for the Catholic Church to try, because my final question, when I heard the gospel today, I thought to myself, well, now, why did our Lord give the keys to the kingdom to Peter? I thought to myself, I don't know the answer. I'm not supposed to know. I don't have to know. That's up to God. And so I think that there are many issues that I believe we should approach with reverence and perhaps leave up to God. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Now we'll have the second affirmative constructive.
Thank you, Peter. I think I may need my eyeglasses with the distance from the microphone. I am Father Joseph Collins. I reside in Jacksonville, Florida. I've been living there since 1989. I was ordained by the rebel Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, who later on, 8 years after my own ordination, was excommunicated for having consecrated 4 bishops in June of 1988. So they say, so went the declaration. It was what we call in canon law a declaratory sentence. But I have not been with his Society of St. Pius V since well before that date. As a matter of fact, it's 14 years now that I have been virtually an independent traditional priest. What do I mean by that? I mean that I'm illegal in the eyes of the letter of the law. You're looking at someone who really, in normal times, shouldn't be wearing a Roman collar if he did not go through the system set up for the education and ordination of clergy. But I do wear a collar, and I do offer Mass and distribute the sacraments. I do have to deal with things which had a way of being resolved in the Church in normal times. And I, like many priests, traditional priests, the few that we are, but we have to deal with questions such as the annulment of marriages from a systematic, foundational approach. What I'm saying here is that the annulment question cannot be looked at by itself. It would make no sense to isolate it and say, how do we approach the fact that 90% of annulment petitions are granted? How do we approach the idea that new Freudian reasons are given for granting annulments, such as psychic incapacity, lack of due discretion, psychological anomaly? How do we answer this unless there is a greater foundation behind annulment?